Welcome to the Corporate Venturing Insider series, where I interview top practitioners in the CVC world and learn with you the best practices and golden nuggets that they have accumulated over their career. In this episode, we will be learning from Ornit Shinar from Citi. Ornit, could you take a few minutes to share your story and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. So I started out in a very atypical way, I want to say, but you'll keep me honest on that and you'll tell me I met 7 people like you before. So I started out studying law. I then worked for the president of the Israeli Supreme Court. And then I worked for the Antitrust Authority and an NGO fighting corruption in politics. So all things that really make it very obvious that I have nothing to do with this space. But high tech was just getting started in Israel and there was a lot of buzz around it. And someone told me, you speak 7 languages, you've traveled the world, you've lived in so many countries, you should go work in high tech. And I went and interviewed for a job in a small startup. It was like 25, 30 people in a little village. We were sitting in a chicken coop that they had converted into a startup. And it was very entertaining. And they said, what would you like to do? Would you like to come do sales or marketing? And I said, what's the difference? They said, oh, go to sales. Come, you can join us now. And for a while, I kept wondering, why did they take this risk? Why did they bet on me? And then like 4 or 5 months later, they IPO'd and I saw that it said that they spoke 8 languages. 7 were mine. And that was my claim to fame and my way into a tech world. And 3 years after that, I was involved in the founding of a startup. And after that, I invested in a startup and then I founded another startup of my own. And I had a few successes. Some of these things exited and became quite successful. So the next company I founded was a company in which I thought I would help startups do everything that I know, right? So everything other than coding, sales, marketing, business development, fundraising, strategy, management, you name it. My first client was Sony Electronics. Lightspeed Ventures was the second and Citi was the third. And in each one of those, I got to work with startups, still doing everything that I thought I would do, but from the other side, from the large enterprise or the investor side rather than from the startup side. Then at some point, Citi had taken me to set up a cooperation program with startups. And I did it for a couple of years, set it up, ran it, showed them it was working. And then I said, okay, what's next? And they said, what do you mean what's next? This is what you're doing. I said, at Sony, I'd done a few investments. I really like that. Let's do investments. And they said, sure, let's figure it out. And by then I knew Citi, I knew how it worked. And I saw that it would take a while till they would get the approvals for this role. And I was offered a role at Lenovo to head their external innovation practice in EMEA. Ended up doing lots of investment for them, really enjoyed that. And 3.5 years later, Citi said to me, we got the authorization. Can you come run the investments for us now? And so I went back to Citi in 2017, and I've been running the investments in Israel since then. And as of a year ago, I also head the external innovation practice with the innovation labs globally. So I have a lot of visibility into startups and how they apply to Citi around the globe. And it gives me a lot of opportunities and access to a lot of startups that could be relevant for investments as a result of that. So I have a 10-person team today scouring the world looking for innovation that is applicable to us.
How do you find and first I can say, no one has your background. It's very clear. Tell me about law and how much of that was formative in you becoming great at sourcing innovations, identifying them, assessing them, becoming a great investor?
So that's a great question. I think there's many things in law that were very helpful. The first thing that you learn when you're a lawyer is to be very structured in your thinking, in your understanding of what people are looking for. And if you're a good litigator, which not everyone goes for litigation, but if you're a good litigator, then you also understand how to ask the right questions, how to get to the right answers, and how to set them up in such a manner that you get to the results that you want.
I love everything you've said. Do you have tips from your litigation and from your CVC experience that you find not used a lot, but actually really makes a difference?
So I think one of our main faults is that we try to sell more than we try to listen. And if you actually listen to what your stakeholder is saying and what they need, then you could tweak your answer to actually fulfill everything they want and they need. So you have to be smart about setting the scene in such a manner that you hear what they are telling you their pain point is and not what you think it is. And then really set up your entire thesis on how it provides them that part, that element that they're looking for, versus who cares that you think this is innovative or smart or that you have a lot of conviction. What you really need to sell is that they have a lot of conviction.
Now, back to your entrepreneur background, how about when you raised funds and you met with VCs and CVCs? Did you have these moments of, if I ever become a VC, I will never do that? Or if I become a VC, I want to do the same thing?
So definitely on the first part, there was a VC that I spoke to, and every meeting I would get the same result in the end. They would say, we really like what you're doing. It would be great if you could just create this tiny little document for me. And they would send me on this massive journey of creating pages and pages of work for them. And after the third or the fourth or the fifth time that they do that and they still haven't moved and they still haven't invested, you get pretty frustrated. And at some point I told my partner, listen, not doing it. They're not going to invest. It's busy work. We have better work to do that will actually either raise money or bring clients, but this is busy work. And for me, one of my first conclusions was that I will never, ever ask someone to create something for me unless I have real conviction in the fact, and I may not be able to get the approvals, but I'm working towards it. And while I'm making them work, I'm side by side, shoulder by shoulder, working towards getting the investment through as well. And if not, I'm not going to ask them to create anything for me that's different from what they already have.
Let me go a little deeper, because FOMO is fear of missing out. And fear, is there any time you think fear is actually helpful for investment?
Sure, when I try to convince my stakeholders. If you think about it, that's the exact same thing. FOMO is your worst enemy when it's targeting you, but if you can use it to target the other side, now it's your friend. But even more than that, right? I think fear keeps us on our toes, makes us ask the right questions in our due diligence, makes us in what we're seeing. As I said, the first go round, I want to listen naively at the story that I'm being told, hear it, absorb it, get a nice feel for it. The second go round, I want to come at it with a lot of questions. Now, if you have the right element of fear, then you can, because you don't want to make a bad investment and you don't want to bring something that isn't relevant, or you don't want to invest with someone who's not reliable. There's so many things that you need to verify. And if you are using fear as a tool to make sure that you stay on your toes and you don't take things for granted, then it keeps you a lot more sharp and not complacent in what you're doing. Fear is a double-edged sword. If it paralyzes you, it's horrible. But if it keeps you on your toes and sharp, it's fantastic.
Now that leads to a corporate VC. So we talked about external innovation. You talked about cost and how the fallacy between the two types of cost. But corporate VC is no longer about cost, it's about investment. So can you tell why we should have corporations thinking about corporate VCs as a very effective way of sourcing external innovation and even assessing them?
That's a great question. So we have two VCs in Citi and they have slightly different attitudes. But the bottom line, I think, is that they do something very similar in the end, right? They look at companies in a specific space, they map it out, they evaluate it, they compare the companies in the different areas. One of them waits till there's a line of sight to an engagement. The other engages prior to the line of sight. But those are the details, because the work prior to that is where you analyze and in VC world, we call it due diligence. But the reality of it is that it's really doing all the legwork of the external innovation, if you will, of understanding thoroughly what challenge the startup is tackling, how well they tackle it, who else is tackling it in different manners, and are those manners better or not, and how big the opportunity is. Now, on the CVC scale, and you know this as well as I do, in some cases, companies will go, if it's a huge bonanza for me as a company, I don't care if it's a big exit or not. And some will say, no, when I look at an investment, I want it to be a great financial return in addition to a strategic fit. And I think they're both legitimate manners of looking at an investment, right? But the outcome is somewhat different. So for us, we're a financial institution. Obviously, we look at financial outcomes. We don't know how to not do that. So you can imagine where we fall on on that scale. But I think it's a great way of ensuring that you have something that is both strategic and a good company that has a good success potential. Because in a sense, if it's a really good company, it shouldn't be selling just to a city or just to UK or whatever, right? It should be able to sell to the likes of us as well. And so if it does sell to the likes of us, it should be doing well financially as well. And I think it's a very good filter to ensuring that you're looking at the best companies in the space and not just investing in something that's plugs a hole in your systems right now.
One way to look at it is if it's exceptional financial return, it's a very meaningful project that solves meaningful problems.
Yeah, look, when you're a big company, I think if it's just really good financial returns, it would have to be really big for it to move the needle for a large corporation. And so if it doesn't resolve anything for you internally, then you've missed out on something, right? It's much better to have really good returns if you've missed the mark on the strategic, because if you've missed the mark on both strategic and financial, now that's a bad investment. But I think if it's just good financial returns and there have been no learnings, it doesn't have to be commercialized, just learning from what you've done and being able to say, oh, we now understand X better. That's fine too. But you need to get some learning out of it, I think, to justify why we've spent our money on this rather than our core business or a really strategic investment.
I would like to double click on this, both from what are we learning and how do you visualize the learning, and also the value add you bring to the entrepreneurs. So let's start with the learnings. How do you maybe capture it is the easy way in a way, but how do you visualize and share it inside the organization?
So that's a really good question. And it's hard, right? It's very difficult, in particular, the larger the organization, the harder it is. A city well over 200,000 people. So you can't go talking to people and making sure that they hear the message. You've got to really get to the right stakeholders and convey it and present the company and talk about it. And we've got newsletters. We've got an internal Collaborate site, which love them, hate them, but it's like a corporate Facebook. We spend a lot of time communicating, talking to the stakeholders and presenting companies all the time, because otherwise you've just invested for financial returns. It's back to the same proposition. If you're not spending your time bringing it into the organization, then the value is limited. The other thing that we've done is we have what we call catalysts. So these are people from the businesses that sit with Citi Ventures and learn about our different portfolio companies and actually spend time trying to commercialize the portfolio all the time. And we have, I want to say, about as many catalysts as we have investors. So we really put our money where our mouths are in terms of not just investing for investment, but working to help our companies and presenting them to the business and pushing them through. But in addition to that, we're the bank of banks, we're the bank of large insurance companies, we're the bank of large enterprise retailers. So a lot of our startups, their dream customers, we know how to reach them, right? So some of what we do is also present them. So in any given year, maybe with the exception of COVID, that trumped the cards there, but we meet a ton of Citi clients and we'll do warm introductions. A client will come and will say, hey, I'm really interested in whatever it is, products in area X. Then we might say, hey, in our portfolio, we have these 3 companies. Would you like to meet them? And we'll do introductions or facilitate meetings and enable them to meet them. This is great for the clients, but it's really great for the startups because they're potential clients for them. So we've really managed to create a system that pushes the companies into Citi and ensures that they get a lot of visibility inside Citi, but also leverages our connections and our capabilities to ensure that we're constantly helping the company in the best manner possible. And if you remember what I was saying in my team, I've got a team of people whose sole job it is to find the right stakeholders within the organization for companies. So they're really working at doing this full time.
And that was my next question. So the team, and how do they track? So I understand they do all these nice introductions, but do they then track how much of that becomes a real business for your startups, a real opportunity inside Citi?
So that's a great question. And I'll divide it into 2. So first of all, yes, we count the number of companies we've met, the number of companies that we've then thought, well, so you've got to first pass our test, right? That we think that you're interesting and engaging, and we want to push you forward. So that's a fraction of the ones that we've met. Then of those that we've tried to push forward, we don't have 100% success rate in finding a stakeholder who also falls in love with the company. So we measure how many of them we've managed to get to a second or third meeting, that there's significant engagement from the business and that they're keen on developing a further relationship with the startup or exploring it further. And we then track how many of them we've managed to convert into a POC. And we then track how many of them there's an agreement to do a commercialization. And then we work our hours on doing the onboarding as well, because if we don't, then someone said they wanted to commercialize and nothing happens, right? Because it's long and cumbersome. So we really walk the whole thing, and we've got the whole funnel measured, and we celebrate every win. Don't misunderstand. Because if you just measure the commercializations, we'll be sad many days a year. So we celebrate the little wins on the way. But we're absolutely honest with ourselves that all those little wins that we're celebrating, they're not the end goal. The end goal is a real commercial deal. When it comes to the introductions that we make, we typically once a quarter will reach out to the startup and say, how did it progress? Where are you at with this company? Is this something we can do to help? And sometimes they'll tell us and sometimes they won't, but more often than not, we will get an input and they'll say, wow, this is amazing. Thank you so much. They just signed a deal or they invested in us and so on and so forth. So we don't have 100% visibility into what's happening, but we do get some decent coverage of the successes. And we've also improved it. So if in the beginning, an insurance company would come visit and we'd say, oh, let's throw all our insurtechs at them. We've learned to do this a lot better with time and to actually ask the people that are coming what their specific interests is. So we'll do pre-calls to understand what they're looking for and then find the companies we think will be most interesting, send it to them for approval prior to the visit, and then really ensure that there's follow-up from the visits. And so the hit rate improves when you do the work. It's a lot of work, but the hit rate really does improve.
With respect to your best practice you mentioned at the beginning, which is don't push, listen, and then you can find the fit.
Exactly.
And so this pipeline, of course, becomes also quantifiable. So does that become part of your team's KPIs, or is that something you don't make as KPIs?
So it's absolutely KPIs. And some people like it more, some people like it less, but for sure it's KPIs. If I tell you, listen, I want you to find a startup in ESG this year and I want you to do something with them, and you bring 30 startups and nothing ensues, nobody bites, it's not a KPI that I will hang you from the tallest branch because there was no POC. I will reward you for having brought the 30, 40, 50 companies that you looked at, and we'll continue looking for the right one for the engagement. So yes, it's absolutely part of the KPIs, but it's not hard KPIs, all of them, some more, some less, but it's not all hard KPIs. It's end all and be all if you missed one.
Now, do you have what I like to call true north KPI, something that your team is looking at achieving?
So for me, the Holy Grail is not a Me Too company that we managed to onboard in a record time at Citi, but rather something that will create a new business opportunity for Citi, or something that will replace another system that we have and save millions and millions of dollars, or something that will be really impactful for the organization rather than a little feature that we will use and we'll be happy and it's all great and congratulations. And we'll celebrate it. As I said, I will be happy to celebrate every celebration with anyone. But the real big celebrations are the ones that are very impactful for your organization and make a difference and ensure that in 20 years, in 30 years, in 40 years, we're not a memory of what used to be a large company, if you think about it.
So we talk a lot about team. So let's talk about recruitment. How do you recruit team members to join a corporate VC? What are you watching out for? What do you care most about?
For me, and that's me more than anyone else, I think that it's not necessarily a rule for everyone else, but I really want to work with these people. I want to like them. I want to feel that they're nice. I want to know that there's no I in team. We'll get along. We'll have each other's backs. We'll work together in a great way. So that's like a super important criteria. I see them for more hours than I'm going to see my husband, my children. I want to enjoy the time I spend with them. So that's one. The other thing is, so in a VC, one of the most important things is quantitative capabilities. But at the same time, you want someone that has a high EQ. and someone that understands people and understands who's on the other side, what makes them tick, how it works, etc. And so I'm always trying to find someone who will be very capable on both fronts.
Now, let's talk about Citi having two corporate VCs. Not so many companies have two corporate VCs. Can you share maybe why, and how it's structured, and how it collaborates?
Yes, I think it comes from originally from different businesses. So the capital markets business is a very unique type of businesses, and consequently, the people that invest in it are people that understand that type of business, of technology needs, of deep understanding of the language of the traders, etc. And so they have their own, or started out having their own VC fund. And Citi Ventures concurrently was doing the investments for the rest of the organization. Now, with time, I think around the capital markets, there's a few more businesses that were added to it. And so now you basically have one investment entity that is investing around the institutional corporate group entities within Citi, and another that's doing the investments in the rest of the organization. And I'd say that it's overwhelmingly pretty collaborative, first of all, because it's quite well split up and it's relatively easy to ensure that what goes where. Investors are typically of one or the other. So I'm in this, I think, pretty unique position in Citi where I invest for both entities. But I think pretty much everyone else is working for either one or the other. And so they know what their parameters are, what their guardrails are, etc. And if it's not within that, then you can take it to the other entity and enable them to invest. And they're looking at things in a somewhat different way. So where the business is investing, they're looking at it from the business's interests. And overwhelmingly, it will be things that there's line of sight to an engagement, or you understand very clearly already why a certain space is strategic for you. Whereas on the other side, you might say this is an area that is going to be strategic. It might be 3 years out. That's okay. We're investing because that's the future of the bank. That's where we need to be headed. But we're not ready to engage with it on the business side yet. And that's fine. We'll build it up and we'll grow with the company to get to that area.
So let me stress test this a little bit, knowing that you can invest.
Difficult position now. Go ahead.
It's actually probably a nice one for entrepreneurs. If you can invest for both, is there sometimes a case where you could decide to have one investment from both VCs and then you have two lines on the cap table?
So yes, we do have certain examples where it's been strategic for both sides, and we've done investments, two-hatted investments, right? Two lines on the cap table. And we do it in a very collaborative manner.
Ornit, thank you so much for your time and sharing so much about your journey and everything you've learned along the way.
Thank you so much for having me, Nicolas.
Merci, merci.
Merci.